Despite their crimes, many men and women with symmetrical faces and without distinguishing characteristics never make the FBI's most wanted. They must have marks, scars, tattoos, or stand out in some other way in order to make the cut. Otherwise, they won't be identified. Fortunately, quite a few murderers have something other than their twisted minds to set them apart. From bludgeoning, shooting, biting, and burning victims, these are the worst from the FBI's list. Let's see what exactly they did in this episode of the infographics show, Most Violent of the FBI's Most Wanted Criminals. Number 10 is Joe Sanz. Some criminals enjoy taking the lives of others, particularly when it comes to mass murderers and serial killers. However, Joe Sanz of the Quattro Flats gang earned the nickname Smiley for a quite disturbing reason. He had a tendency to be downright jolly when killing people. He was caught on camera happily smiling and greeting others as he walked toward the front of a house. The man there owed Sanz money, and he rubbed his hands together eagerly. Sanz then pulled out a gun, shot the man again and again, and continued on nonchalantly. Those who viewed the footage likely had to rewind to be sure of what had even happened. Unsurprisingly, it was not the first crime he was known for. A decade earlier, he walked up to two rival gang members, shot them multiple times at point-blank range, and then sauntered off quite casually. We can bet he was smiling as he left. He also raped and killed his own child's mother, thinking she would rat him out to the authorities. These violent tendencies, far from a liability, actually got him promoted. He went from a small-time gang to a member of an international drug trafficking organization. Once he made the FBI's most wanted, he planned to kill whoever would ultimately discover him. Given his history, everyone knew he would do just that if given the opportunity. In fact, by the time he was caught, he was feared by both rival gangs as well as his own. Fortunately for them all, he will end his life behind bars. Number 9 is Gary Ray Bowles. Bowles began his life of crime in Florida when he both beat and strangled the man he was living with for unknown reasons. He then went to Maryland where he crossed paths with David Jarman, who he also strangled before robbing. Weeks after this, he was in Georgia staying with a 72-year-old man who died similarly to the others. His next murder was the most brutal though. Albert Morris had been gagged and beaten, shot with a shotgun, and strangled. Bowles stayed in the home of his next and last victim for days with the body in the back room. Clearly, he had an indifference to human life and thought nothing of choking, shooting, and beating people to death. Many who viewed the scenes of his crimes noted that his brutality was far beyond what was necessary. Due to the nature of his crimes, Bowles was sentenced to death twice. Initially, it was reversed by the Florida Supreme Court, but then he was given the same sentence yet again. Number 8 is Richard Lee Tingler Jr. On one September morning in 1968, the bodies of 4 adults were discovered in an Ohio park. They had been shot at least once in the head, if not multiple times. A little over a month later, a 15-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl working in a store were tied up and robbed. The thief decided to leave no witnesses. Removing the door from the safe, he used it to savagely beat the teens and then shot each in the head. The store owner, who was also present, somehow survived. She had been strangled with a wire hanger, but it knocked her unconscious and the thief didn't quite finish the job. Richard Lee Tingler was eventually suspected of the attacks through various evidence. He made the most wanted fugitives list in December of 1968 and began to use a fake identity to escape punishment. A few months later, he killed a 49-year-old man and robbed him of his vehicle and money. However, at this point, his days were numbered, and he had drawn quite a bit of attention. Further, he looked a lot like the man in the FBI's Most Wanted poster. He was apprehended and the cost of his crimes was death. Number 7 is Eric Rudolph. Eric Rudolph carried out the bombings in the South starting in the summer of 1996 when he placed a bomb concealed with a backpack in a busy Atlanta park. He had put nails in the device so they would work as shrapnel and shatter bone and slice apart skin, flesh, and blood vessels. 2 people were killed while over 100 others were hurt when it went off. His purpose was to cancel the Olympics and make the government take a financial hit due to its stance on abortion. However, that was just part of his plan, and he went on to cause 3 more explosions. With these, he made it so that additional bombs would follow the first in hopes of injuring those responding to the scene. The targets included an abortion clinic and a gay nightclub, resulting in several injuries. The last explosion was at another clinic in Alabama, which killed an officer but left a witness. This person had license plate numbers which led police straight to Rudolph. Police found evidence in his house that implicated him in the bombings, but he fled to escape punishment. Caught not long after, he now faces 5 life sentences. Number 6 is Christopher Wilder. Christopher Wilder was known for his hand in construction and real estate. but began a second occupation in 1984. For about a month and a half, he became a murderer as he drove from Florida to California and after that to New York. Preying on attractive women everywhere, he became known as the Beauty Queen Killer. Sadly, he was quite successful at what he did. He abducted a minimum of 12 women during his journey and killed 8 of them by the time it ended. Hardly a looker himself, he attracted the ladies by showing off his shiny cars and fancy real estate. He also bought cameras and would lure them in by promising to take modeling pictures. In February, Rosario Gonzalez disappeared, and Elizabeth Kenyon, who had dated Wilder, vanished after rejecting a proposal of marriage. Both were placed in locations with Wilder before they went missing. Private investigators soon leaked his description to the press, and after withdrawing cash, he fled the area. It was Linda Grover who had wanted to be on a magazine cover that later identified him. Wilder had hit, strangled, and shocked her, and even glued her eyes closed, yet somehow she survived. In fact, she screamed loudly enough to scare him off. Still, he wasn't caught, and so another woman was drugged, stabbed, beaten, and tossed in the woods. Fortunately, she lived, while others didn't. He continued this behavior as he passed through additional states until he snatched his very last victim. He was then shot and killed in Canada while fighting an officer for his gun. Number 5 is James Whitey Bulger. James Bulger was arrested at the age of 13 and would spend the rest of his life in and out of prison. This included a 1956 arrest for bank robberies in 3 states. After 9 years behind bars, he joined the Winter Hill Gang before befriending Stephen J. Flemmi. Flemmi would become his partner in crime as well as a fellow FBI informant. Both men reported on the mafia for the benefit of the US government. Being informants hardly tempered their own activities. Both are linked to many crimes, and Bulger has ties to as many as 19 homicides. Some of these were members of rival gangs, such as James O'Toole, who was shot by an automatic rifle before taking a bullet to the head. Others were suspected of providing the FBI with damaging information on Bulger, such as John B. Callahan, who died by brutal execution-style shot to the back of the head. There were also people in the wrong place at the wrong time, such as Michael Donahue or Michael Milano. Both were simply too close to the intended target. It didn't seem to matter to Bulger one bit how many people he killed or for what reason. However, his own welfare was certainly important. He fled and spent the next 16 years in hiding before he and his girlfriend were apprehended in 2012. At his trial, Bulger claimed that he had been granted immunity by the Department of Justice in exchange for his services as an informant. However, this claim was ignored, and he was found guilty for his role in a staggering 11 homicides. Number 4 is Ted Bundy. Bundy landed a spot on the FBI's top 10 fugitives list in February of 1978. 5 days later, he was arrested after going too fast in a vehicle he had stolen. Years would pass before he met his end in an electric chair called Old Sparky, and those outside the prison set off fireworks after his execution. But what did he do for his death to be celebrated like the 4th of July? His time of crime began in the mid-70s, when women began to disappear in Washington and Oregon. When he moved to Utah for school, women went missing there too. Turns out he was murdering them. He would often pretend to need help or be a figure of authority and lure victims to remote locations. Once there, he would rape and beat them to death. And that's not even the worst of it. He would revisit the scenes of the crimes to carry out various sexual acts on the bodies. This continued until they were too badly decomposed to make it possible. He also had a collection of human heads in his home. Bundy escaped suspicion because he was attractive and charming, and at one point he even convinced a mayor to write him a letter of recommendation. This likely became quite an embarrassment later. After all, Bundy was a serial killer and one of the most depraved to ever live. Before his death, Bundy admitted he killed 36 women, but many think it's over 100. Number 3 is Rafael Caro Quintero, the narco of narcos, who helped create the Guadalajara cartel. He made large profits off of shipments of marijuana that were brought into the United States. But he is known for much more than trafficking drugs. In addition to countless other atrocities, he allegedly abducted DEA agent Enrique Camarena, his pilot, an American writer, and a dentistry student. He then tortured and murdered them. As far as the writer and the student, their offense was to have accidentally disrupted a party. As punishment, they were taken into a room and tortured while questioned. The writer died due to blunt force trauma while the student was buried alive. They were not discovered until months had passed. Some suspect that Quintero thought they were spies, which they weren't. Undercover DEA agent Enrique Camarena was very much a spy and had done considerably worse. He had brought authorities to one of Quintero's marijuana ranches, and 10,000 tons of plants were destroyed. Over $1.5 million in profits were lost. Quintero wanted revenge. He had Camarena and his pilot kidnapped, and they were delivered to him at the Guadalajara residence. When he first saw Camarena, he gave him a hug before leading him to a room where he was hit and burned nonstop for hours. It's believed a physician injected him with something as he passed out, so he would wake up and be tortured some more. During this process, a man would later allege the Mexican Defense Minister, Interior Minister, Federal Judicial Police Director, and Mexican Interpol Director were in the living room listening. By the time Camarena died, it was morning. His and his pilot's bodies were found in the ground wrapped in plastic and filled with bullets. Quintero is still at large after he was released on a strange technicality and fled before he was recaptured. Number 2 is Ramzi Ahmed Youssef. As a young man, Youssef studied bomb making and recruited terrorists on al-Qaeda's behalf. Soon his role expanded. He met with Oman Abdel Rahman, a cleric in New York, for the support and materials for an attack on the World Trade Center there. He planned it out and helped with the design of a 1,500-pound bomb. This was then driven into the building's garage. When it went off, 6 were killed and more than 1,000 more were injured. However, this one success was followed by multiple failures. Youssef allegedly plotted to kill the Pakistani leader Benazir Bhutto, but first explosives went off in his face, and then a sniper's gun was delayed in transit. He was also linked to the attempted bombing of the Bangkok-based Israeli embassy. However, when the man driving the bomb got in an accident, he fled, leaving the explosives to be discovered. Youssef's idea of sneaking liquid nitroglycerin into 11 US planes and then exploding them over the Pacific Ocean was not a success either. Asked to assassinate President Clinton, he believed it was too complex, and though he tested a method to kill the Pope, he never implemented it. So while he killed several and injured hundreds, he wasn't the smartest criminal out there. In fact, he was mixing up chemicals when he started a fire that drew police to the scene. He fled but left behind key evidence on planned acts of terrorism. Just 1 month later, he had been captured and sentenced to life in prison, and there was more than enough evidence against him. Number 1 is Osama bin Laden. As a young man, bin Laden came to believe in the ideas of Abdullah Azzam. These were that Muslims should wage jihad or holy war and form one Islamic State. When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, bin Laden went with Azzam to support the rebels and recruit others to join the movement. Their success gave him confidence, and he created al-Qaeda with the goal of carrying out more symbolic acts of terror. The group caused a lot of destruction. It armed Somali soldiers who killed 18 Americans and was implicated in the New York World Trade Center bombing that same year. There is also evidence it tried to kill the Egyptian president, bombed a U.S. training facility, and brought down an American military building within a few years. By 1998, over 200 people had died and thousands more were injured in explosions at several embassies. This landed bin Laden on the FBI's most wanted list, but his crimes only continued. In 2000, he took credit for the bombing of an American warship which killed another 17. While indicted of the bombings, bin Laden lost no time and went about planning the attacks of September 11, 2001. This was the biggest strike yet, with the Pentagon and the World Trade Center as targets. 2,753 people died as a result. However, in May of 2011, President Obama was able to state that justice had been done and the bloodthirsty al-Qaeda leader was dead. His body was shipped by an aircraft carrier into the Indian Ocean and buried there in an underwater grave. What do you think? Are these men pretty violent? Is there someone we left out or is missing? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called FBI versus CIA. What's the difference? Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.